Hello, everybody. I think we're getting this all figured out. Um, my name is Francie Dudry at Nuspire, and I'm excited to invite you all to our third episode of Socket to Me. And sorry, I have two things going on at once. We're learning, folks. So, as a reminder, the purpose of this show, we talk about the latest threats. We talk about what we saw in the weekly threat brief, any sort of news that we think is important, and we have a lot of fun while doing it. And so if you've joined us before, you probably recognize two of these lovely gentlemen. We've got Mike Pedrick, who oversees or VP of our cybersecurity consulting, and then we've got Chris Roberts, who has a nice design with his beard today.
Hey, I was going to start it with like this,
He
remember?
was going to do that, and I said you should mess with everybody because they might freak out that you got rid of your beard, and that would be funny. And then we have a special guest. If any of you have been on our threat report webinars, you probably recognize him. It is Josh Smith, our principal threat analyst. He is, or threat intel analyst. Is that right?
That's
I had
right.
it somewhere. Close enough.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he is the author of our quarterly threat report. And he also does, anytime you see a new blog that we put out around a recent threat, that's all him, as well as we do a weekly threat brief for our clients. So we brought him on because we wanted to get a little bit of sense of his perspective, because he is in it all day long, and get some of his insights on what he's seeing. So welcome, Josh. It's nice to see you. Nice to have you on. And there might be a little bit of delay. I'm just going to warn you now because Josh lives in the boonies. So if there is a delay, that is why. I'm not shaming Josh. I think he lives in a wonderful place, but the internet is not the best. So, well, let's get into it. Do we still have Josh? He looks frozen.
He looks very frozen. Yeah, we lost him.
The
squirrels failed.
This is a first, folks. We have a guest. We've offended him so quickly that he has decided he is out. No, he's coming back, but I think we can still kind of get started. So,
poor Josh.
I know. It. Okay, we're gonna let him back in. Come on in, buddy.
Here we go.
That's live technology for you. Of course, I live very rurally, and so my internet, this is always my biggest fear. Luckily, it's never happened during one of my threat report webinars. And of course, today you guys invite me on board, and now's the day my internet's really going to throw a fit. So thank you.
That's okay. That's okay. We said a lot of things that it's probably best you weren't here.
Yeah, I see.
We love you, Josh.
I know.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about some of the biggest news that we saw this week. And does it mean anything? Does it not mean anything? So the Lockbit figurehead was identified. And we talked a little bit about this the last episode because I was asking about Lockbit and how when the DOJ and a few other folks went and shut them down, they feel like they just regenerated. And so what does this mean? Is this a big deal? Should we be excited?
So, I mean, it's always a good thing in general when law enforcement does some form of action against the ransomware gangs. It lets them know at least we're going to be fighting back, and we're not just going to take ransomware attacks laying down, so to speak. And so, yes, the FBI and the Department of Justice, in pairing with other foreign organizations, identified a gentleman by the name of Dimitri as being the head of Lockbit and put a $10 million bounty on him, and as well as put his picture everywhere throughout the world. So it should have put them on their back heels at least. The question is, what happens next? So ransomware in general isn't really falling away at this time. In fact, we saw in our report, we saw a 4% increase from publications. So hopefully what this does is it puts some fear at least into operators to say, yeah, it may take some time, but you're going to get identified at some point and we're going to come after you. And so that's what I'm hoping from this, if anything, is it disencourages, if that's the right word, unencourages, I'll go with, in fact, and say, hey, I shouldn't be doing this. Someone's going to come after me at some point.
What, Mike? What is this face? Okay, can you weigh in, please?
I was the word discouraged just hanging around in my head like a pinball. He's almost there. So here's what I'll say. I completely agree. Right, like if this cat is the figurehead for the Lockbit ransomware gang, it really does nothing to reduce the risk to the masses in general. Right, this is one guy. And so really anybody can pick up the sword, that sword being ransomware, and run with it, whatever the rest of that metaphor starts to look like. So I do think that it's great. I think, as Josh said, it's really great when law enforcement is able to do what they've been tasked with doing. But I don't know. I feel like this is a blip on the radar.
Chris, I know you're on the chat.
Yeah, I'm having fun on the chat one definitely as well. Hopefully there's not too much of a keyboard noise when I'm doing this.
I didn't hear anything, so
I don't know what the heck I'm doing differently, but I'm glad it's working. To some degree, I'm with Mike. The only one thing I will say on something like this one is all too often what we've seen in the past is that law enforcement have actually come after the bit players and the end users. I mean, I remember years and years ago, we went chasing all the carders, and there was a lot of work that we did with a lot of the carders. But we would typically only get those that had, 100 cards or 1,000 cards in their hands and a whole bunch of other stuff. Rarely, if ever, would we get those that would perpetrating the original crimes, doing the heavy-duty distribution. So it is nice to get one of the heads and one of the figureheads, should we say. So on the upside, great, we got them. On the downside, both to Josh and to Mike's point, the mechanism's still going to carry on working. I mean, it's no different than any other crime family boss type thing. You lop off a head, another few pop up. I'm going to go on mute just for a second.
Perfect. Okay. Folks, we are live, and this happens. It is interesting that he compared it to a crime family. I mean, because it kind of is. So are we talking, do we have capos and lieutenants and things like that?
Can I draw a comparison?
Yes, please.
They're not as popular now, but the hacktivist group Anonymous, I always found that to be ridiculously powerful, because the benefit of never knowing who is in Anonymous means that anybody can be in Anonymous, right? And so part of the why I bring that up is that ransomware as a service it's empowering. I already said it. Let's leave it there.
It's out there.
It's empowering for folks, because anybody at any time can do a ransomware through that model, right? So, I mean, it's always going to be an issue, and I think that it is, again, super great that law enforcement has done what they were chartered to do, but I just don't see it being a big thing.
So I think, long story short, you still need to prepare and be ready for ransomware, because it's not like yay, it's done. It's never going to be done.
And this is one of countless variants.
There's another thing. There's a flip side to
It's the delay.
Yeah, there's a flip side to this, though, and I will say it. There was an article in the good old BBC. I think it was last week, and they finally were able to disclose what had been happening for the last couple of years, but at least the last couple of months, which is they'd broken one of the cellular networks that one of the crime gangs was using over there. And all of a sudden, they finally got through all the prosecution, they finally did everything, and they said, okay, now here's how we knew what was going on. So in this instance, and the same thing happened several years ago over in Europe, as part of the action for that one, where we actually broke the ciphers on a bunch of the phones that were distributed for a whole bunch of crime stuff. We kept quiet about it for an extended period of time, and we monitored. And in that case, we didn't just take the head out. We took the entire mechanism out, so the roots, the grass. And so I think we ended up prosecuting, I mean, there were like 1,500 arrest warrants that went out all across Europe. And in this one, I think there were 300 or 400 they arrested in this one. So if you can get so far inside that you need to disassemble the mechanisms themselves. And that's a lot of flipping work, especially when it comes to the ransomware side of things.
Oh my goodness. Josh, you were going to say something. What were you going to add?
There's... like I said, I have a delay with you guys, so I apologize about that for starters if I step on anybody. But in general, what I was getting at was just that there's multiple ransomware variants out there. So I mean, there are countless that are not affected by this event. And again, maybe some of the higher figureheads may say, hey, that could be me one day. But in general, even if Lockbit itself was shut down, that would just create a power vacuum that numerous other organizations would move right into and take over. While it's still happening, while ransoms are still being paid out, while it's lucrative, it's going to continue to happen. There's people out there that are going to see that the risk in their eyes is worth the reward of executing these attacks. And while they can still do it, they will. Rant over.
Well, Rand, thank you. Over and out. So I want to kind of switch gears a little bit, because one of the things that we talk about, and Chris, I think this was yours that you wanted to chat through. We talk a lot about MITRE mapping and the importance of MITRE. And you had brought up that even the folks who are helping us in terms of our cybersecurity and reinforcing that are also susceptible. Do you want to talk a little bit about, what you've learned and your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, and I mean, Josh probably sees this one as well, is when you start to research the adversaries, you yourself become a target. And it doesn't matter if you're a threat researcher working inside a company, or in MITRE's case, they very, very articulately laid out not just a roadmap of how an attack occurs, all the way from initial recon, all the way through to exfil and profiting in some cases. They didn't just map it out, but they also put a bunch of tools in there as well. So you can look step by step by step by step and look at a bunch of tools. And there's so much data in there, which if you're on a business side is absolutely fantastic because you get to understand the mindset. But if you're on an adversary side, you sit there and you're like, stop showing my tactics. And I mean, Josh is the same thing, as Nuspire publishes documentation to say, hey, we're seeing this and we're doing this. It puts us much more on the spotlight, and adversaries don't like having the spotlight put on them.
Yeah, I'll say to add to that here too. We just recently had, I won't particularly say who it was, but we had someone who had an article that they were in that was being shared across dark web forums. And so felt it was worth letting the person know, hey, by the way, your name's floating around out there, and notified internal security as well too, because while that article wasn't necessarily anything particular, that now puts their name out there. It gives it someone to be interested in and someone to dig around with and say, oh, there's that person. Oh, they work for Nuspire. What's that all about? So it's just that spotlight that gets put on you.
For sure. So, but didn't they got a breached, right? There was like a nation state actor that went after him. Yes?
Oh yeah, it was our friends over in the Far East decided to go make friends with them and go after them again for very, very reasons that they were being called out a number of times as the tactics and the methodology and everything else. And as a nation state, you spend a lot of time and a lot of effort trying to figure out how to remain hidden. So again, when somebody shines a spotlight or when your tactics are exposed, then that causes problems and issues and angst and concern. And so yeah, you go after whoever's basically shining the spotlight. In this case, the MITRE crew.
Yeah, and one more thing.
And I think there's something to be said here.
But with that, one of the things that Chris was mentioning specifically about TTPs or tactics, what we use on the threat intelligence side is called the pyramid of pain. You can easily Google that and look it up. And it's a big old triangle that shows what's going to be the most effective against a threat actor. One of the most trivial things that against them is things like hashes and IPs. They can change those things so quickly. But if you look at the very top of the pyramid of what's so effective in stopping them, it's tactics. And so they definitely don't like that.
Pyramid of pain. I feel like we need t-shirts for that. I really like that. Like, I'm not, I mean, I'm kind of being funny, but like at the same time, I've never heard the pyramid of pain. That's why we have me on here, because I'm the one who's like, what?
We could have some fun with this. I stood up on stage at B-Sides in Chicago. It was B-Sides 312 in Chicago over the weekend. And my co-host and co-presenter was giving me a bit of grief about something along these lines. So I retorted with sticks and stones may break my bones and whips and chains excite me. We just need to basically do the pyramid of pain excites me. And be done with it. I like that one. Done. Make it happen.
All right. Well, I am on the marketing team, so put it right there. But I think the thing, circling back to the MITRE thing, because I think there has been this expectation among folks that, like, if you're like a MITRE, or if you're really big and this is your key focus is, you know, cybersecurity and TTPs, how the heck would you get breached? You know, and I think it points to, it's not, everyone is susceptible. It doesn't matter who you are. And I think people are learning it doesn't say anything about who you are as an organization or team. I mean, obviously, if it happens all the time and you don't know how to come back from it, then I think there's some things there. But I think it's important to note that it's not, you can't prevent cybersecurity. You can't prevent breaches. I mean, you can protect against them, but there's no such thing as like 100% security. Mike, what do you think about that?
So this is a frequent refrain when I'm teaching, when I'm speaking, you know, so on and so forth. Risk never reaches zero.
Yeah.
Full stop. So the sooner that we, especially practitioners, especially information security practitioners, the sooner we come to grips with that, the more effective we can be at risk management.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like, you know, if you're coming in and you're working with a client and you're like, oh, we got you. Well, you know, no worry. Like that's selling that's selling a bit of a lie. Mm-hmm. Because Chris, you talk about this a lot. It's protecting, or is it you have something you say around preventing?
Yeah. So there's a good piece, and I actually did it again. Part of the talk this weekend was talking about risk and probability, and how we calculate it. So I had some fun. I said, look, risk, exactly to Mike's point. Risk is always present. Getting out of bed is risky. Staying in bed is risky as well. And so you start looking at, how do I quantify that risk? What is the probability of that risk occurring? And so I had a little bit of fun, because every now and again when I go through the airport, I will carry dog treats with me fairly deliberately, so that when the TSA sniffer dogs come along, I every now and again what I'll do is I'll put a piece on the ground where they're close by, and they're like, ooh, just as I'm going by. So it's always interesting. Or I have occasionally put a piece of bacon and other things on somebody in front of me or behind me as their suitcase rolls by, just because, you know, you do. So it's all about probabilities and risks. So the risk is always present that the dog's going to come after me, but the probability is that if I can shift it to somebody else, I have more fun. So it's all about the probability. Exactly to Mike's point, something's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And it's all about how quickly and how effectively you know. This is, you know, from Josh's standpoint, this is why you start taking a look at intelligence, threat intelligence, OSINT, and everything else. It's like, look, we're all targets, whether we like it or not. It just depends upon, to Mike's point, the pyramid of pain, exactly where we are on that, whether our asses are going to get handed to us on a daily basis, or whether we're low enough on the totem pole that we kind of skip by unless we've got some easy stuff out there. It's what do we do? How quickly do we know? How quickly can we be identified and aware? And how effectively can we recover?
Exactly. I think that's really helpful. And yeah, threat intelligence, obviously important, because I think I've heard a lot of people say, you don't know what you don't see. Like, you can't, how are you? Yeah, you got to know what's out there. And then, Josh, there are so many things out there, but what do you care about? And,
and that's where
I
intelligence
know,
becomes
so
important to
Josh,
help prioritize
you do a lot
things.
of stuff for our clients.
Absolutely. And so that's where threat intelligence
Keep
comes
going.
important to help prioritize. There's going to be a gap there somewhere, probably way back at this point. But anyway, to help prioritize, you get the entire list of vulnerabilities that come out. Just today, I looked at a bunch of different CVEs that may have been affected, but you have things like criticality. Okay, is it a medium versus a high or a critical? Well, if it's a critical, I need to prioritize that first. Okay, are there threat actors that are known to be exploiting this particular vulnerability that's critical versus the other one that's not being targeted? Okay, there's a known exploit for this particular one. We need to focus on that one first. And so that falls back kind of, Francie, into you were mentioning, like your known unknowns and things like that. That's where you bump into things like 0 days, your known unknowns. We know there's vulnerabilities out there. We just don't know what they are, but we need to be able to prepare and rectify ourselves around fortifying our defenses to be ready for those sorts of things and have those internal checks and balances to look for if something gets past the perimeter. One more quick thing on my rant. You're talking about MITRE. Specifically, they got hit with 0 day. They got hit with the Avanti Connect Secure 0 day. And so that's brand new. Nobody knows there's patches for that yet or anything of that nature. So what do you do in those circumstances? You've got to have that layer of defense ready to be able to capture if they get past that exterior gate. Done.
Well said.
I mean, Ted says it right in here. So I'm looking at the LinkedIn conversations. Ted says it, which is we start talking about anomaly detection. The only challenge on that one is if you don't know what you don't know, if you don't have eyes across your environment, if you don't know what the baseline is, if you don't know how users react, if you don't know what's normal inbound, outbound, egress, and everything else, it's hard to put that in place, which goes back to, it's not just, you don't just put threat intel in place, but it's that entire ecosphere saying, hey, we're going to monitor. We're going to manage. We're going to take a look at things. We're going to figure out what your steady state traffic looks like on any type of given day. We'll allow a certain amount of anomalies, which then comes back to Mike's side of it, which comes back to probability and risk. And then we start taking a look and going on the intelligence side. You sew that all together, and that way you have much more effective eyes on your environment. I mean, that's all it is.
If I can, I used to run an anomaly detection team, analysis and reporting team. And I always counseled my folks that, these are events. We don't know if they're incidents. We don't know if they're problematic. That's a different team. If specific thresholds have been breached, they're reporting on that. We are in there looking for the weird stuff, the stuff that we don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. It requires understanding the business. And so I think the call to action isn't just for service providers or consulting professionals to understand the business, but if you are a CISO, if you are an analyst, you are in any way, shape, or form associated with risk management for the company, get up out your chair, walk around the company, learn who people are, what their interests are, what motivates them, etc., so that you can make an educated judgment of, I see weird things. Is it indicative of just weird things happening? Or is there a recently divorced dad looking to do a crime out there?
I like it. You just had to go for the recently divorced dad, didn't you?
I did. I had to.
We apologize to all recently divorced dads who may be watching this.
Yes.
We don't apologize. What we can actually do is put up some darknet websites where for a portion of a Bitcoin, you can rent yourself whatever you want. Maybe.
Oh, goodness gracious. Okay. This time flies. It really does. But I do want to talk about this thing, which is very interesting. And there's been a lot of discussion around it in recent years. But Microsoft put out some news around its executives and holding all of them accountable for cybersecurity. And we've talked in the past about, it's not an IT issue, it's a business issue. But now it's like, actually doing something that, hits people where it counts, which is in their pocketbook. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on it.
I think golden parachutes just got dramatically bigger.
Ooh.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Ew.
Who's going to take the gig for anything less, right? Yeah. If I'm going to be held responsible for a, dumpster fire of a, information security program, I want it in writing up front before I sign that when that happens, here's my golden parachute.
Hate it.
No, you're right though. It's tough. I mean, it's back to that. It's okay. Devil's advocate on this one. If I can walk into an organization and effect change, and I actually go into my job to effect change, I would say to me, it's less about that golden parachute. It's all about the collaboration, cooperation, all that other stuff. I'm trying to figure out a way around what you're going with. Because here's the thing: if I can't affect change and I get penalized, and it's not for my lack of trying, at that point, then I'm going to have to build a case that way. That's Damn it!
And Mike is so pleased that he just.
Yeah. I have no parachute. I don't know what you're talking about.
But I think it does speak to the importance. Like, people are realizing this is not just, the CTO or the CSO. It's not just their job. It's everybody's job.
And it's more than just a job. I think this is one of those things where, to me, and I think the whole logic for this one, and because I was looking, I think the whole logic for this one, and Ted's talking about it as well, which is, we should be holding, especially those folks that are building the stuff that we rely on to safeguard and secure ourselves. Mm-hmm. If they're not building quality equipment, how the heck are we stand a chance of actually implementing something effective? Therefore, tying somebody's compensation to the safety and security, I like it, but only if I can not just be accountable for it, but I can actually affect change. I think that's where Mike's coming from, and he's right.
Yeah, okay. That's a lot more complicated, I guess, than I initially thought. But Mike makes a good point. Chris, you make a good point. I'm just ready to get to a point where I can have a golden parachute. But let's just
let me know when you find that.
I'll let you know. I'll keep you all posted. We've got a couple more minutes. I do want to point to a few things we have coming up, but then if there's anything else folks want to share, please do. But we've been talking about this. I think we talked about it in the last one, but incident response, we've got a two-parter. I'm going to sound like a Boston person. Sorry if I'm offending Boston people, but I have to say it. Two-parter webinar series talking about incident response. Chris and Mike are going to be leading it, and it's going to be an actual tabletop simulation. And so the first part is the simulation part of it, and the second part is talking about recovery and strategies and things like that. So encourage, if you're interested in learning about what a tabletop might look like or how it can be deployed in your company, this is a great way to do that. Also, I think, and Chris has said this before, people think tabletops are these long, drawn-out exercises that requires a lot of resources to pull together, and it doesn't have to be that way. Right, Chris?
Oh, wholeheartedly. I mean, literally, we could run, in the 30 minutes that we're here, we can run 3 tabletops without a shadow of a doubt.
Okay, yeah. So I think that's important. Mike, what are your thoughts, since you're going to be co-hosting? Anything you want to shout out about it?
Yeah, the other myth I'd like to dispel is that the only thing that comes out of a tabletop exercise is understanding the incident response plan. There is so much more that gets exposed in the course of that conversation.
Yeah. Before I do want to take I'm going to do a straw poll, because as we were talking about pyramid of pain, Mike came up with a new sticker idea, and I just want to get a sense from our viewers if they like the idea. So it would be, where is it? Pyramid of pain, Nuspire is my safe word. Discuss, let us know. I love it.
Oh, did you see the other one I just put in the internal chat?
Why don't you say it?
I got a whoopee cushion, not a golden parachute.
Actually, that's great.
So just
nothing funnier than fart noises, but it's also kind of sad. So, I mean, we'll take it. Well, if you all have questions, what?
A quick plug for anybody who hasn't found us yet at a conference. Nuspire has some delightful stickers, right? It's not landfill fodder. It's not stress balls. We have plenty of stress, and I'll leave the rest of that sentence alone. But there's very clever stickers that you can get from us wherever you find us out at a regional conference. So keep an eye out for those. They're like Pokemon cards. Collect them all. Very, very clever. Super fantastic work on the part of the marketing team for putting those together.
Well, thanks, Mike. And yeah, we're going to be at a lot of events. We have an events page on our website if you all want to check it out. We're also going to be, for our Denver folks, at RMISC in June. I will be there. Chris will be there. Mike will be there. Josh, I don't know if you're going to be there because you're in Ohio. Probably not.
I will not be there.
Maybe we'll get like a life-size cutout of you and bring you with us just so we feel like you're there.
Yes.
Guys,
we need at least a Josh head. Yes.
And I haven't even had lunch yet. Well, I thank everybody for joining. There is a form, like if you guys want to get more on our quarterly threat reports, we've got a link for that. But we will see you in a couple of weeks. I believe it's May 30th. If you have any things that you want us to cover, please don't hesitate. But thank you so much for joining. Josh, thank you for joining. You did a great job.
Thank you.
We will see you all next time.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Stay safe.